I have some thoughts about this election, to, I imagine, nobody's great surprise. I have been meaning to write all this down and stick it up on Medium or Substack or similar. I just have not got around to it, and we are nearly out of time. The election is almost upon us. Things are pretty chaotic here at the moment. It's all good stuff, there's just way too much of it. And I figured I've got the camera already set up. I've been doing other stuff. What the hell? I'm just going to have a rant and say it all to your faces. All right, there is now pretty much universal consensus, even if not everybody's saying it out loud, that the Conservatives are probably going to lose on July the 4th and probably lose pretty big. Some people think we might be in line for something along the lines of the 1997 Labour landslide. Some people think we might even be looking at something of the nature of the 1993 Canadian Conservative meltdown, when they went overnight from being the ruling party in the Canadian Parliament to having, I think I'm right in saying, 3 seats left. As this possibility gets bandied about, I keep reading columns and op-eds and essays about why this would be a terrible thing if the Conservatives don't just lose, but actually get properly stopped. How this would be bad for our society and bad for our political culture, because you need a strong opposition to keep the government in check, and it would be a terrible thing if Labour were to get a supermajority. Okay, I'm not even going to go in at length about why the use of the word supermajority is deliberate bullshit, all right? Supermajority is not just a word for a big majority. It has a specific meaning, and it's a meaning that does not apply to our parliamentary system on any level, okay? The only reason you're hearing people use that word is they're trying to lull Labour supporters into a false sense of security, make them think it's a done deal so they don't turn up, and indeed terrify Tory voters at the idea of an all-powerful Labour government to make sure that they do turn up. And the thing is, it's completely bloody irrelevant anyway, because there are no checks in a parliamentary system. It wouldn't actually make any difference if Labour did end up with a massive majority. As long as your majority is big enough to withstand a decent-sized backbench rebellion, then you're fine. You're home free, you can pass whatever legislation you like, and the opposition can't do a damn thing about it except piss and moan. So a government with a 250-seat majority doesn't actually have any more executive power than a government with a majority of, say, 90. But my purpose in making this video is to explain why, in my opinion, this idea that a massive Labour majority would be a terrible thing is bollocks. It would be, in my humble opinion, not only the best thing to happen in this country for pretty much my entire lifetime, it would actually be the best thing that could happen to the Conservative Party right now, for the Conservative Party's own sake. You see, the Conservative Party is not like other political parties. It's completely unlike all the other parties in Britain, and it's quite unlike pretty much any political party I can think of anywhere in the world. You see, it's not a political movement as such. They're not bound together by any kind of common ideology. The Conservative Party is essentially the political wing of the British establishment. It's the political wing of the ruling classes. It's the political wing of the status quo. Not the political wing of status quo. That would actually be quite fun. The status quo. They are the party that represents the way things are. And this is reflected in their language and attitude. There is a certain epithet that the Conservative Party uses to describe itself, and indeed sometimes even its opponents use to describe the Conservative Party. I'm sure you've heard it. They call themselves the natural party of government. And indeed, are they not the natural party of government? They are the sons of the country's superior bloodlines. They have all been educated at the country's finest public schools, where they have been given the resolve and the mettle and the irreparable psychological disorders necessary to go out and build an empire. So obviously they are our natural-born rulers. Now, not only is this an idea which is a good 100 years past its sell-by date, it is just in and of itself incredibly corrosive. Because if it were actually true that a particular given party were the natural party of government, would it not then surely follow that all other governments, all governments formed by other parties, were not merely less desirable, but actually unnatural? If the Tories are the natural party of government, then all non-Tory administrations are an aberration. They are a sign that something has gone fundamentally wrong with the fabric of society. And you don't have to extrapolate this shit. It's right there if you look for it in the Tory media sphere. Basically, as far as the Daily Mail and the Telegraph are concerned, our country has two possible states of being. State one, the Conservatives are in charge, God is in his heaven, and all is right with the world. Even if, as might well be the case, our economy is death spiralling and we are up to our knees in our own shit. And who knew there'd come a day when that wasn't even a metaphor? Or, alternatively, the Conservatives are not in power. Somebody else is. The plebs have seized the wheel, the troglodytes are at the tiller, and we're off to hell in a handcart. Even if, as may well be the case, peace and prosperity reign throughout the land, fuck that! We're off to hell in a handcart! These positions are in no way amenable to facts and evidence, incidentally. So if they genuinely believe, and I'm happy to take them at their word, that they are the only natural leaders of the country, then why would they not also believe that anything that gets the Conservatives into power or keeps the Conservatives in power is, by definition, in the national interest? Even if it involves burning the country to the ground and pissing on the ashes. If it gets the Tories in, then that is in the national interest. Again, you don't have to guess. They say this shit with their own mouths. I remember, just after the utterly farcical and unnecessary 2017 election, which was only a year after the farcical and utterly destructive EU referendum, Michael Gove was being interviewed on the radio, and Michael Gove, who, whatever else you think about him, is not a stupid man, actually said, and I remember this verbatim, of course, Conservatives always put the national interest first. And I thought to myself, Jesus Christ, he believes it. He actually fucking believes it. They've just dragged the whole nation through the shit unnecessarily twice in the space of a year for no reason other than to protect their own electoral prospects. And he actually thinks they were acting in the public interest. Because you have to bear in mind that all the indignity and depredation that's been inflicted upon this country in the last 10 years, every bit of it has been done by or on behalf of the Conservative Party purely in order to service the needs of the Conservative Party. All of this is happening because 10 years ago, 2 Tory MPs defected to UKIP and David Cameron shat a brick and thought to himself, oh no, if Farage raises any more support, then at the next election he could split the right-wing vote and let Labour in. Which, of course, ironically is exactly what he is now doing 10 years later. So Cameron thinks to himself, haha, I shall be clever. I shall neutralise UKIP. I shall sideline Farage by giving the people the only thing he has to offer, which is a referendum on EU membership. Ha ha ha! Jobs are good and I've saved the Tory party. And I'm fairly sure that's literally as far as his thought process went. I don't think he gave a second's thought to how they were actually going to conduct the referendum, and not even a nanosecond's thought to what the fuck happens if we vote leave. Just about the only slack I can cut him is to believe that maybe he thought, well, after the election, we'll still be in coalition with the Liberals, so I can always say, oh dear, I really wanted to have the EU referendum, but the Liberals won't let me. Boo to the Liberals. Because, of course, it would not have occurred to David Cameron in 2015 what was glaringly obvious to everybody else, which was that the Liberals were going to get decimated because they'd betrayed their own base back in 2010 by going into coalitions with the Tories in the first place. You see, and I'm getting a bit sidetracked, but I'll get back to the main track in a minute. You got to remember in 2010, Gordon Brown's Labour Party had moved so far into the centre, the Lib Dems were actually to the left on a lot of the big questions. So I can say with absolute certainty that nobody went into a polling booth in 2010, voted for the Lib Dems and thought to themselves, ooh, I really hope this gets the Tories in. And then a couple of weeks later, they all discovered to their absolute horror that their vote did indeed help to get the Tories in. So of course the Liberals are going to get shellacked at the next election. But this wouldn't have occurred to David Cameron because, well, why would anybody be upset with someone for helping the Tories win? They're just restoring the natural order of things. So you can see how toxic this idea actually is. If you read, as I sometimes do, some of these columns turning up online from the Telegraph and from the Times, some of these right-wing commentators, It is now finally dawning on them why the Tories are as fucked as they are. It's because they've screwed up everything. There isn't a single aspect of life on these islands that the Tories have not shat on. And everything they've done has been in order to shore up the fortunes of the Conservative Party. And they've done it all with a clear conscience. Those of them who have consciences, that's by no means all of them, because they've genuinely believed that by keeping the Tories in at all costs, however hideous those costs have turned out to be, that they were serving the national interest. We have, this Thursday, almost certainly the only chance we're ever going to get to brutally disabuse the Conservative Party and all its apologists of this most toxic idea. It's not enough for them to lose with dignity. They need to be humiliated. They don't need a period in opposition. What they need is a period of irrelevance. Because if they just lose, they'll take it on the chin like they always do. Oh, never mind, blew that one. Ah, well, let the plebs have a go for a few years. They'll just fuck it all up, and the papers will be on our side, and in 5 years' time, we'll be back in. Hurrah! What we need is on Friday morning, for the half dozen or so Conservative MPs who are still left standing, to be there in smoking underwear, blinking into the sun, wondering what the fuck just happened and what the fuck do they do now, and to not even have the beginnings of an answer to either of those two questions. And when they return, and frankly, I don't give a fuck if they ever do, but they probably will, when they return in whatever new form they've assumed, whatever banner they've rallied around, they will know. They will not admit out loud, but they will know that they are not, nor were they ever, the natural party of government. They're just a bunch of posh kids who got important jobs handed to them on a plate, exactly the same as with everything else they have in their fucking lives. And if they want to get back into power, they're going to have to earn it like everybody else. I imagine you'll have some thoughts on this. Stick them in the comments.